Welcome to Ted's Tiny Trucks. We're in the garage today and we're going to get back on with the FJ40. So I'm going to do some hairspray weathering today. It'll be interesting trying to film it. Hopefully it will all work. As you can see, the body shell, various bits and pieces, wheels, etc. have been crudely shot with some dark brown, some medium brown and the odd hint of orange to give a rusty effect. What I'm then going to do is spray the whole thing with hairspray. The weapon of choice today is Tesco's everyday value stuff. So I'll give everything a coat of hairspray, dry with a hairdryer, give it a second coat, and then waft a couple of thin coats of top coat over the top of that. The idea being that if we then start to use a moistened brush or pick, and we pick at the top coat of paint, because the rusty colour and the top coat of paint are separated by a layer of hairspray, as soon as I get any moisture underneath that top coat of paint, I can lift it off as the water dissolves the hairspray. That's quite a nice technique that the military modelers have been using, and it's very good for giving scale chipping effects. So I'm just interested to see whether applying the same principle to something at nominally 1/12 scale is going to work out okay. So I'm using Tamiya XF55 deck tan for the top coat on the main body. And then the bumper, grille and wheels today will just be getting some XF2, some flat white. The idea is I'm hoping to remove most of that to leave the rusty effects, which would be okay. I shall probably drop a touch of XF19 sky grey in the top of that, just to get rid of the brazenness of it. Okay, it's been a couple of hours since the painting was done in the garage, so top coat is basically dry now. So I've got the camera set up between me and the wheel, so I shall try and do the weathering via the viewfinder, and we'll see how that works out. So nothing complicated at this point. I've just got fresh water in a glass. I've got a couple of old paintbrushes, one of which is supremely knackered, which is great. It's got a nice stiff bristles, it's great for agitating paint. And then I've got something, well, pretty much like that one used to be. So longer bristles, a bit more gentle. And I've also got some of that horrible toilet paper that you actually wouldn't want to put anywhere near your butt. I use that mainly for mopping up, as you'll see in a minute. So what we're trying to do really is get some moisture between the two coats of paint which exist on there at the moment. So what I'm trying to do is just start around an edge, work a bit of paint in, and we'll see what happens. So it's not a quick process, but you can start to see, hopefully, it's just starting to break through on that edge now. So we keep scrubbing, you can start to influence the direction in which your paint chips. So as it's a wheel, try and do something really that runs around the circumference. Now you can always stop at any point, dab on with a piece of that horrible loo roll, take some of the colour out and start again. So the big advantage of doing it this way is that you do get an element of randomness to it, which I think you struggle with if you applying paint directly from the brush. Sometimes that random element of removing something rather than adding it actually makes things look slightly more natural, which really is how it works in the real world. You know, you don't add rust as such, you remove paint and then get rust. So you can see, you can make a good judgment, of course. If you put too much of your top coat on, you can imagine that this is actually going to be quite difficult to scrub off and actually generate the effect that you want then. Likewise, if you put too little on, it's just going to come off far too easily and you're not going to get that really nice craze effect. So I don't know if we can I focus this any better? Not really. It's a difficult thing to show the degree of chipping. I suspect what I might have to do is take some still photographs and superimpose them in on various bits as we go through. So again, just scrub the paint off. A bit of water. What we'll do is we'll start to get a bit of water around the inside as well. So that starts to come off. It always works better when it's slightly damp, slightly soaked. In this instance we're going to leave a bit more of the white paint in the centre, as we're going to argue that the wheel at some point will have run hubcaps for a large percentage of its life, and it's only as it's got more dilapidated that they've come off. So we'll just sort of weather the outside. I mean, one advantage of doing little bits of weathering like this is it picks up all the edges. To start to show some of the details on the wheel then. Unfortunately, white is probably the worst colour in terms of harshness. So I think what I'm probably going to do is stop there and crack on. Actually no, take a bit more off one of these edges, I think. You can see how easy it is just to rip a bit off, leave a bit of white paint on there. Okay, so that's looking a bit chewy, for want of a better phrase. Right, so the other thing to remember is that this is a single step towards weathering. You know, the contrast is fairly aggressive. There's no subtlety about this at the moment. You might get a fine grade of chip. Actually, what you need to start thinking about is, in this case, staining the white paint and actually adding some dirt to it. So what I'll do is I'll crack on with the others and then we'll flash back when I've got them all to this stage, and we'll stick a bit more of we'll do some weathering on it as opposed to just removing paint. Okay, so the next stage to weathering process is to try and add some more subtle variations of colour. At the moment we've got something which is essentially white with a hint of grey versus dark brown. So the contrast is quite heavy. It would be nice to mellow that up a bit. Now normally I'd just use washes. I think I'm going to use a little bit of dirt this time as well. Now wash wise you can make your own. Essentially it's just a thinned acrylic paint that you put on and then wipe off if necessary, or you just apply very gently to get it to sit round details and give you some form of definition. At the moment I'm now using the Army Painter Quick Shade washes just because it's simpler. I bought a box of, I think it's 11 washes in the end, and if I just do a quick pass through on the top run, so I've used each wash and stuck it on a piece of white paper so that I can see the variations in colours that you get from the thing. So in this instance we're using dark tone, flesh wash and light tone, And then because I haven't got anything orange, I've just mixed some up using some Vallejo Model Air, well, ironically orange rust colour, which is just about perfect. And if I drag the brush up, you can see that it's a nice bright orange colour, although as it's a wash we apply it quite thinly, so it loses some of its intensity. Now again, with washes, it's about sometimes what you take off rather than what you put on. So what I try and do is apply a dark tone, the flesh wash the light tone, so I work from dark to light, mopping up here and there, taking bits on and off, and we'll just see how this one looks as we go through. So it's a fairly haphazard approach, if I'm being honest. You can do it very finely if you want to do so. There's a point at which you just have to concede that there's lots of it coming off, and you can't spend hours on it. Well, you can spend hours and hours on it, but I'm choosing not to in this case. So, bit of that on, and then dab off with a tissue paper. In fact, I'm not sure you can pick the subtleties out sometimes. Again, white's a not great colour for showing this off, but hey, live and learn. I'll try and do it on something else another time maybe. In fact, well, I've got a beige body, that might show up a bit less contrast if we're lucky. So you can use tissue, or in this case I've got an old brush. What I can do is stipple that, and what that does, and then take the excess off on the paper. What it does is it gives me a slightly more random finish. So although I'm controlling to some extent what I'm taking off, I can't actually control all of it. So it gives, again, we get that nice random thing that I keep banging on about. So work up to the lighter shade of brown again. Now we want to be careful, we don't want to put too much on at any one time, because of course it's water based and it's liquid, so it will just remove the white paint in the same way that we were doing earlier with the short brushes. So I'd like to say it's a degree of subtlety, but I mean subtlety is not my strongest point with this one. Right, so I'm going to try and do now. Just assume that a couple of spots, I'm going to get that new rust coming through here and there. And again, just using a big brush to take it off. We just want a hint of colour rather than a big dub of it. If we don't like it, we can use another brush just to gently, I think it's too intense, just to touch in and remove it, so we can build a bit of subtlety up there. So this area here looks quite white, so we'll start again. We'll try and do this time, let's see if we can leave some of it. Just around the edges of the holes, so you can see a bit more subtlety to it now. Okay, so we'll see how that looks when it dries off. I'll crack on with the others, and I'll back in a minute. Okay, so I've done the wheels. A couple of examples. They look much worse through the camera lens than they do in real life. Although to be fair, that is still pretty grimy. We'll see how they come out properly when they're dry. So, whilst I'm waiting for those to dry, it's time to deal with the tyres. So I've got some Scotch-Brite here, which you can use the scour on the back of the kitchen sponges. What I'm aiming to do is just take some of the shine off the rubber, and then I'm going to rub it in some mud from the garden, and the end result is a tyre that looks more like that than that. So it should look more in keeping with the hopefully aged paint and aged wheels, which I'm doing for it at the moment. So I'll do a bit of clean up and I'll show you how it goes. The idea of the Scotch-Brite really is to just gently abrade the top surface, give me some scratches to rub some dirt into, and kill the sort of glossy release agents type finish that you get. So I'll just quickly just go over the... Oops, sorry. So it's already made a difference. And what we're going to drop it into is an old baking tray full of dirt from the garden. So I mean, even when you brush that off, I mean, water's going to take it back out, to be fair, but all of a sudden that looks far more in keeping. So, no, I'll crack on with the other three. Okay, so I've got the wheels and tyres done now. I've painted the hubs in the centre a weathered black, and I'll give those a black wash when all the paint's dry. I've also moved on to doing front bumpers being pretty much decimated, to be honest, and the rear bumper, well, likewise. I mean, that's pretty aggressive. I've got staining to do on that to get rid of the white parts, and I mean, these long parts here are actually supposed to be lights, although I can't remember if I've got any stickers. So I also thought I'd figure up, because I'm about to start the grill on this one, if you excuse me while I talk the camera. And one of the things I want to do on this is create small rust chips so that you can see those up here. I'm doing that with a cocktail stick because it's slightly easier. So it just involves getting it wet and then actually just gently picking away at the surface. So you get a bit more control than the paintbrush. No doubt making some horrible squeaky noises as far as the camera is concerned. That's it, and as soon as you've gone through, tend to stop and dab off. So I don't know, you can just start to see picking up there. So it's a quick one, I'll keep going, but off camera because it's awkward. But just so you can use a different technique. You can use the back of knife blades, you can use matches, you can scrape down in an arc. So there's lots of different things that you can do, and it's worth experimenting and having a play before attacking a model. Right, as you can see, I've done the grill, so I've picked and moved a bit of paint around. Unfortunately it doesn't focus so close when it's in recording mode, so you have to take my word for it. And then in order to check that I've got everything painted that I need to have painted, I've loosely assembled the thing, dropped the body on the chassis, got the wheels on, got the front bumper mounted on, and I'm just having a quick play now. See what else needs rectification. The rear bumpers thrown on for good measure. So I found the stickers to cover these up, and I started some loose chipping and what have you on the back there. So it's funny, you start to do it subtly and then you realise at this scale actually you need to be a bit less subtle and get on with it a bit more. So I shall endeavour to do a bit more aggressive work on the main body tub, and probably do the same again on the top. I've got the rear windows in as well. A bit of two minds really. I was like, do I leave them in until after I've matte varnished it? But actually they're going to need some weathering, so I think it's probably best to drop them in so that I don't risk damaging the paint anymore. And then actually they're fairly simple shapes to mask up with tape when I put matte varnish over the thing. Yep, roof's gone on. I don't know if you can, in fact you can't see it, so it's all right. There's a small blob on the top. I have no idea why. I'm going to try and see if I can change it into a Bob Ross happy little accident and see how we get on from there. I have to say, I'm pleased with it. It looks funky and it looks slightly gnarly. The rusty wheels and what have you. It looks a long way from how it came out of the packet, which is quite pleasing. I think what I'll do now is stop recording, edit all this lot together and create one video, because I think it's already going to be a long one, and then I'll do another shoot probably later tonight of me weathering this main body tub down, certainly doing all the chipping, and then I'll go through the process of assembly, because I think the final weathering with washers etc needs to be done with things like the grille and everything else in place to give it a more uniform feel, and I can pick up on all the recesses and such like then. Okay, right, well, I'll leave you with that shot briefly, and thank you for watching.